Good morning out there. Give me a second to set everything up, but you're at the right place. There's people here. It's good. Tuning in to get your intro to Jiu Jitsu fix. Turned into the right station. Doggies. Oops. This makes a difference. All right, we're back for chapter 3, or the third installment of our introduction to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we're basically moving along our fundamentals curriculum that we have over here, modified, of course, so you can actually do this at home. With a partner in this case, although if you don't have a partner, you can certainly follow along, get the information from when you're ready to find a partner. All this is going to be it's obviously being uploaded to YouTube right now, so you can watch this forever and ever and ever, and every screw up that I ever do on this. But yeah, so if you didn't have this, if this is your first thing, or if you're watching live right now, continue watching with us. So you can always go back to the old chapters 1 and 2, or whatever I called them, to go back and reference what's going on. But this is designed specifically for folks that haven't done jiu-jitsu before. Now, whether it's two partners there, or a lot of people have told me you're sheltered in place with somebody. It's like, you love jiu-jitsu, you can't stand not doing jiu-jitsu, and you're with somebody that hasn't done jiu-jitsu yet. This is the program for you, okay? Everything we're gonna do is designed to be worked with either a gi or not a gi. Today we have our gis on. Why? I just like wearing my gi. Why not? But nothing that I'm gonna go ahead and do in any of these classes online is gonna require to have a gi, so don't feel bad about that. If you want to get a gi, by all means, go ahead and do that, okay? What we're going to work on today is the mount. More often than beyond that, though, the theme for the class today, aside from the mount, is that there's always a way out. There's always an easier way to do stuff is going to be our theme, okay? Now, we're going to start off. Again, I'm not really doing the warm-ups on these classes. There's videos on how to do warm-ups, how to stretch out, and how to go along with that. I'm going to go ahead and bypass that and go straight into it most of the time, except when the warm-up and the exercise and the movement is going to be very prevalent to what we're going to go ahead and do. Okay, so keeping that in mind, what I'm going to start off with right now, being here on the ground, we can do this solo. I always like to say this. If I'm a ground fighter, and a lot of people refer to jiu-jitsu as a ground fighting art, okay, or that they'll use jiu-jitsu when it gets down to the ground, which is not an unfair assessment. We do spend a lot of time on the ground. I do prefer to call it the chart, though, what we do when we're in close contact. But having said that, obviously everything we've been doing has been from the ground. But rambling right now. If we're going to call us a ground fighter, I'm going to say it's not necessarily because I like going to the ground or I like being on the ground. I do. Okay. The reason why I'm a ground fighter is I know how to use the ground effectively. Okay. I know how to use the ground from a defensive standpoint. I know how to frame off it so I'm strong. I also know how to use it from an offensive standpoint. I know how to smash people into the ground. Okay. I always like to say, as long as I'm connected to the ground in the correct way, as long as I know what I'm doing with the ground, you're not fighting in outer space or underwater or something like that, which would be a different art, I guess. No, clinch artists. Okay. But as long as I'm connected to the ground, I always feel like it's never just me versus my opponent. It's me and the ground versus my opponent. Or if you want to be that person, it's me and the whole wide world versus my opponent because I'm connected to it in that way. Okay. Keep that in mind. We're going to go ahead and do what's known as a bridge. Okay. So the connection I'm going to make with the ground right now is with my feet. The heel of my foot on the ground, the ball of my foot on the ground. Within reason, I'm going to go ahead and pull my feet into myself. Okay. To get a good bridge on this right now. Okay. Remember rule number one is I'm very protective of my head and my neck. So when I do anything, I tend to lift my head off the ground, my chin up to my chest as I can. Okay. And we're just going to go ahead and do a real simple bridge right now. Visualizing it comes from the ground, through our feet, through our hips, and just lift up. And I'll just go ahead and hold this plank position in between my knees and my shoulders. I'm going straight up right now. This is a very basic and safe bridge right here. Okay. You can do this on your own right now. Just kind of come back down, gather yourself up, take a deep breath. And again, from the ground through your feet, through your knees, to your hips, up into the air, thrusting like so. And this is a basic bridge. Okay. Now, go ahead and keep doing that right now. You can see Trevor doing that in the background. This is a good stretch. This is a good core strength exercise, particularly works both sides of it right there, your front and your lower back right there. And it's useful in any situation you can think of, okay, as a workout and everything else, but not super useful to what we do in Jiu Jitsu. Well, that's not 100% true, but I'll explain that in a second, okay? Usually the variation of bridges that I like to do, instead of just going ahead and stopping at the hips from the ground to my feet, to my knees, to my hip, and I'm lifting up and planking this way, is I'm going to do a variation where I'm going to bridge up and over my collarbone, okay? When I do this, you'll see this on the ground. But I'm going to make this point when I do this, that the portion I'm rolling over is going to be between my neck and my shoulder, i.e. my collar or my traps, and I'm not on the side of my arm when I do this, okay? Let me get from this variation right here. So my feet are planted in the same way, close to my body, heels close to my butt, okay, within reason, okay? Such a thing as too far or too close, okay? And it's from the ground through my feet, through my knees, through my hips, up and over my collarbone, arching and reaching back like so, and I'll come back in. That's a basic, we're going to call it UPA. From the ground to my feet, through my knees, through my hips, up and over the collarbone. I'll just go ahead and make that arcing motion. We'll just go ahead and go back and forth. Do that right now. Alternate left and right. And again, as you go over that collarbone, as you arc back right here, you'll really feel like the extension and the stretch on your lower back. You'll feel your core develop as you do this. This is more akin to what we're going to go ahead and be working on. Notice when I do this, my body position right here. I'm going to have to shot this right here. Two things. Number one, starting from my feet, we're going head to toe in this case, I guess, or toe to head. But the closer my feet are into my body within reason, the more powerful bridge that I'll be able to get. Look, if my feet aren't connected, my hips can't even lift up at this point. If my feet are too far away, it won't lift up. If they're too far in, maybe that works for you, but this isn't all that comfortable for you, okay? There's a certain level of comfort you have to develop. So I pull my feet in. I'm pretty flexible in this. Heel on the ground, foot on the ground right here. Heel on the ground, ball of my foot on the ground right there. And I'll go ahead and make that bridge stay solidly on the ground. And I'm just going ahead and alternating left and right. And also notice when I do this, as I'm alternating left and right, but the side of my arm isn't touching the ground. Again, I'm going over that collarbone and the trap, not on the side of the arm. That's actually a fairly important detail right now. Okay, you can alternate left and right, and again, here, not here. Okay. Again, getting a little bit more useful for in terms of what we would do with Jiu Jitsu. Okay, very useful as a stretch and extension and working your core and your lower back. But in terms of something simulating a maneuver, okay, of what we'll do in Jiu Jitsu, there's a little bit more we have to add to that. Okay, the full name of the move we're going to do is UPA, UPA. Why it's named that, I'm not 100% sure. Little story, like any jiu-jitsu gym you ever go to, if you ask me to demonstrate UPA, they'll show you a variation of what I'm about to show right now. okay? Which is unusual these days with how spread out Jiu-Jitsu is, that one thing has like a name that everybody agrees to, particularly something like an UPA, okay? But anyway, what's gonna happen in this case is I'm not gonna stop. So I'm gonna go ahead, my feet are close to my body, okay? And again, from the ground through my feet, through my knees, through my hips, up and over my collarbone, but I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna drive through with one motion right here, okay? Up and over my collarbone, boom, to my stomach, basically turning so I'm facing down on the ground. Now, if I'm simulating that I'm doing this in a jiu-jitsu context, somebody is on top of me, okay, which we'll get to in a bit, then I want to gather myself up, good posture, shoulders over hips from our lessons in 1 and 2, whereas if I have good posture, always good posture, safer against attacks, safer or better position to pass guard, better position to attack myself. So this is my finishing position, okay? Go right here, we can do this together. Hopefully we have space for this. Again, pulling your feet into your body, okay, within reason. From the ground through your feet, through your knees to your hips, up and over your collarbone, an explosion motion, boom. And then coming up, good posture, shoulders over hips. Okay? If you have space for that, go ahead and go do that a few more times for me. Do it from this angle right here. And I want you to notice something else, okay? Again, my power source is how I'm connected to the ground, how I'm driving off the ground. I always like to say, I like to repeat, I like to do things so it's literally drilled into your head. From the ground through your feet, through your knees, to your hips, up and over your collarbone, up and over. That's a bridge, that's a proper UPA. That will help me escape, okay? You'll notice though, it's not a roll. I'm not rolling over the side of my arm, and I'm not throwing my feet back in this, okay? I'm driving through, okay? All of my power is gonna come from this motion, from this UPA, how I'm driving into the ground. The second my feet leave the ground, whoa, slow motion, a little bit difficult to do, but the second my feet leave the ground, I can no longer continue to put power into the move, okay? Think about it this way. If you're jumping, okay, crouch down, Super Mario Brothers start right now, how high I'm gonna get is gonna be determined, actually at this point right here, as I'm pushing off the ground, okay? Once my feet leave the ground, I swear I have higher jumps than that, sometimes not much, but the soft surface absorbs a lot of the energy there. But the second my feet leave the ground, I've essentially already determined how far up I'm gonna go by how I was pushing off the ground. I can't flap my arms to get up any higher at that point, okay? So that UPA works in the same way, okay? All the power is honestly gonna be delivered from pushing off from the ground through my feet, through my knees, through my hips. My feet will have to leave the ground eventually, come up and over, like so. But it's done at the last possible second, okay? I'll say this again as a jiu-jitsu fighter, somebody that looks to the ground for like my source, okay, for lack of better words. Knowing how well to connect to the ground for myself, knowing it's the most efficient way to work from the ground is going to be key to me, okay? And making sure my opponent's not connected to the ground in a meaningful way, they don't know how to do this, will also be key for me. But it's always what I can do internally first and externally, okay? But this move, this UPA right here is very much a staple position with the jiu-jitsu. Know how to do that UPA, know how to drive through, and it's going to pay dividends and plenty of other moves, okay? So that is the UPA, okay? Do it 1 or 2 more times. And again, just say it with me, from the ground through our feet, through our knees, through our hips, up and over our collarbone, boom, and gathering up, good posture, shoulders over hips. Again, have it in mind when you do this, that somebody is on top of you that doesn't want to leave, okay? Not only do they don't want to leave, they're probably thinking about doing something not very nice to you at that point, okay? So you got to get this technique down. You have to go ahead and, for lack of better words, put a bit of power in it, put a bit of commitment into this, because not only do you have to get yourself over, again, we're getting somebody over that doesn't want to go over. That's the competitive nature of what we're doing within jiu-jitsu. And what situation would somebody be in that they would be, or would you find yourself in that you would use this maneuver? Glad you asked, okay? Let's talk about a position known as the mount. Trevor, do me a favor, lay down. So, now, The mount is a ground position where one person's on top, that'll be me to start off with, one person's on the bottom, but the person on the bottom cannot effectively use their legs, okay? The positions we worked on last week were guard work. Say here from the closed guard, okay? Closed low guard if you were paying attention. This is a position where Trevor on the bottom can use his legs for offensive and defensive purposes, okay? I would argue, based on the posture of the person on top, if everything else is equal, it's a relatively inherently neutral position, okay? However, the mount is different, okay? The mount, the simplest form I can give you is a ground position where one person's on top, one person's on the bottom, but the person on the bottom can't really use their legs for offensive and defensive purposes, okay? Regardless of the skill, strength level, et cetera, this is inherently a much better position for the person on top to be in than the person on the bottom to be in, okay? Trevor's in trouble. And a little bit further of a definition, not only can Trevor not use his legs, the position I have in a mount is essentially I'm sitting on his torso, straddling, okay? Which would be different than if both my legs were aside. This would be known as a side control or various other positions right there. But a mount, okay, the simplest definition I'm gonna give you is a ground position where one person's on top, one person's on the bottom. The bottom person cannot use their legs for offensive and defensive purposes. That's one. And two, the person on top is sitting somewhere on the torso, straddling their opponent with a leg to either side. Okay, that's the most basic definition I can give you of a mount. Okay, now again, really good position for the person on top, really bad position for the person on the bottom. We're going to be focusing on what to do from the bottom to start off with right now. Okay, and in a sense that it's not a great position to be in. In fact, it's one of the most terrible positions to be in. It's still not game over yet. Again, as long as you keep yourself safe, as long as you haven't surrendered and been finished off, you always have a chance for victory. You always have a chance of coming back and winning that match, okay? So things look really dire right down on the bottom, but as long as you haven't been finished off, as long as you haven't been injured, incapacitated, or tapped out, you have a chance of winning that match, okay? Or encounter, wherever it is, as terrible as that is, okay? All is a way out if you keep calm, okay? But when I'm on the bottom, what should the first thing I should be thinking about is? Okay, if Trevor is on top of me right now, what is the first thing I should be thinking about? Okay, it would be my safety. Always come back to that prime directive. It's safety first, then position, then finish. My safety is my obligation and my, let's get a little bit closer right here, my first priority at this point, okay? And I don't think I'm safe right now. This is clearly an awful, terrible position to be in. But there's degrees and variations. It's like, how safe can I possibly be? What is my first priority? Number one, I got to protect my face, okay? Again, in the friendly confines in this gym, in the sporting aspects of jiu-jitsu, you don't have to worry about this. But let's say it was MMA or street fight, and if Trevor just wanted to wail on my face right now, yeah, that would be awful. I got to think about how to protect it and cover myself in this sense, okay? Just know that in terms of traumatic damage, if Trevor was to land a strike and a punch to my face from right now, statistically, he'll do about 4 times the amount of damage that he would have done if we were standing up facing each other. Why is that so? Well, there's 2 reasons behind that. Number one, the physics of this is that Trevor has gravity, he gets to come down at this downward force, and you can actually fire off, if you know what you're doing, a lot more force behind this for coming to this downward position. And number 2, which makes this even worse, is the fact that my head's on the ground. So as he goes ahead and lands that punch, it's going to go ahead, slam my brain back in the ground. My neck and head doesn't have anywhere to go. And it's almost like I'm getting hit twice, okay? Because my brain's just going to get hit once in the front from Trevor's face, from Trevor's fist rather, and then back into the ground right now, okay? So this is obviously a terrible position. The first thing I say is I say protect my face. I can't get any uglier than I already am. But I'm really thinking protect my head and my brain. So my hands come up here, tight to myself right now to protect myself right now, okay? Like so, protect my face. Kind of like in, for lack of a better words, a boxing stance right there, where I'm holding from a visor. 100%. So from a bottom position, I tend to be like here, keeping tight most of the time, okay? Again, don't want to leave the face exposed, and trust me on this. If your arms ever extend from the bottom, if I reach out, I'll make myself vulnerable in a lot of ways, okay? So first thing I do is I protect my face, okay? Like I said, if I reach out and if I do something like this, I'm also making myself vulnerable. Go ahead. Something we're not going to cover today, but other submissions, arm bars or things like that. Okay. So I got to protect my face. I got to protect my arms. I got to protect my position. Yeah, I said that the mount is like one of the worst positions to be in. Okay. But there's degrees of how bad this can go. Like, those people that are experts in the mount, well, we can certainly make this worse. Right now, as far as mounts goes, this is relatively benign. Trevor's sitting over my hips, so it actually makes it easier to escape. If my arms are loose, if I flail around, if my elbows start coming up, Trevor's going to be a lot smarter into a high mount right there. My arms come up to here, and things got drastically worse at that point. Okay, so I keep my elbows tight to myself. Okay, so I protect my face, I protect my neck, I protect my arms, I protect my position. Okay, and I'm holding tight right now. Okay, I initially tend to have my feet close to my body. Again, so it's that power source right there, okay? But even before I got the UPA, I'm bringing my feet in close to my body, usually to start off with, depends on what I'm gonna go ahead and do. So I have that connection to the ground, I understand what's going on. Now, like I said, we're in kind of more of a friendly sport mode. I never really wanna talk about anything or put somebody in a mindset or do something that would get you killed in, say, a street fight. That was also kind of the old school aspect of me. I can't ignore that, okay? So if we got into a fight, if Trevor wanted to do damage to me, one other thing that I might do to defend against the punches is I'll go ahead and go to that initial, very first bridge that we did, looking my chin into my chest a little bit, pushing off the ground, lifting up my hips and bridging up this way to keep Trevor off of me right now. Or not so much keep him off me right now. You notice what happened when I go ahead and I held this bridge right now is Trevor's weight came forward and landed on his hands. You know what happens if Trevor is going ahead and holding this position by holding on his hands right now? Or you'd rather he's not doing when he has to do that? He's not hitting me in the face with his hands. Whereas if I'm down here, if he has a good base with his hips, he's free to go ahead and fire off all the punches he could want right now, okay? But again, keep my feet close to my body. Elevating, lifting this bridge up right now, making his weight go to his hands, makes me a little bit more defensive at this point. It's hard for him to punch me in the face. Not that I would hang out here too long. Not that I feel safe in that situation, okay? But it's a consideration if we were going ahead and doing more street fight, self-defense, MMA type standpoint right there. Okay. But for right now, we're not. We're going ahead, we're back in the friendly confines of our dojo or your house or wherever you happen to be training at right now with a partner that you probably don't want to rearrange the dental work, okay? And we just want to learn the essence of that UPA, okay? Now, let's go ahead and rotate this way. Just because we're in the friendly confines right now, just because Trevor's not going to hit me in the face, he's probably going to go ahead and do something with his hands. He's probably going to try to grab me or choke me or do anything like that. I like to go ahead and actually grab my opponent's hands, at least initially, just to kind of stop it, okay? When I grab it when he's down right here, a lot of times in Jiu-Jitsu, they'll grab you. I'll go ahead and grab back right now, okay, at least initially. So I'm going ahead and holding this tight. Again, I don't feel safe here, okay? I just degrees of safety. And by grabbing onto his arms, it's going to help set up my escape, the UPA, okay? I bring my feet in close to my body. When I bring my feet in close to my body, I like to bring it in close enough that I trap Trevor's leg or his feet so he can't post out. We'll do this from a different angle. And now I'll go ahead and make that UPA, okay? I'll drive from the ground through my feet, through my knees, through my hips, up and over my collarbone. I come up on top and I wind up in the guard, okay? Good posture, shoulders over hips. Again, we'll do it from this angle right here so you can see how I trap his foot. As the mount. Again, a lot of times they'll grab me, I'll grab them. But for purposes of drilling and working with the partner right now, you can just go ahead, you can have your hands on your chest or reach and grab your collar if you haven't had the beast. And I'm gonna go ahead and reach and grab back. I'm gonna hold them at the wrists or at the hands or whatever's comfortable on this right now. Bring your feet in close to your body. And again, see how I like to bring this in close enough so I trap his foot. This is gonna make it harder for him to escape, because if I left this out right there, he's gonna post out, it's gonna make it more difficult for him to go over, okay? So I bring my feet in close to my body, and again, from the ground through my hips, through my up and over my shoulders with Trevor on top, okay, one big motion. I like to look in the direction I'm about to go, okay? Up and over, good. Shoulders over hips. And we've now transitioned from going into I was underneath the mount, so now I'm into Trevor's guard, okay? Which is still not a happy position for you to be in, but a much safer, much better position than being underneath his mount, okay? I would definitely rather be in the guard. There's always kind of degrees of where I'm at. Like now, from a football analysis, I was on my own goal line to start off with, being in danger of the safety when I was underneath the mount. Like it doesn't get a whole lot worse than that, okay? By doing that hoopa and coming into his guard, maybe I'm about the 50-yard line, give or take, depending on who I'm dealing with, et cetera, okay? So I've just basically made that. Again, maybe a different angle, try from here. My first concern, you can't see this right now from this angle, isn't necessarily my escape, okay? Remember, the order is safety first, then position, then finish. My first goal is to keep myself safe. Again, Trevor's not necessarily striking me. I'll just go ahead and hold tight right there. Bring my feet in close to my body. I like to look in the direction I'm about to go. From the ground through my feet, through my knees, through my hips, up and over my collarbone, drive through, and I'll wind up in the guard situation right here, okay? Good posture, shoulders over hips. Now, when you drill this, when you're practicing this with your partner, okay, I believe that you should be able to do moves to both sides, okay? I think you should go ahead and drill both to both sides, although I usually suggest work on your strong side first, work on getting those details down about where your body goes, where your legs go, what your arms do, and then work it through before trying it to the opposite side, okay? So particularly on offensive moves, a lot of times on offensive moves, when I'm driving, when I'm controlling, when I'm steering, when I'm doing what I want to do, I tend to go ahead, I usually work a little bit more on my strong side, what I'm comfortable with. I'll get those details and nuances and figure a few things out before I work on my weak side, okay? That's just a little bit of philosophy. That's how I roll. That's how I do things. I tend to do a little bit more on my strong side. Eventually it'll balance out, okay? Because I'm the one that gets to direct which is my strong side, which side that I'll work to and set things up and whatnot. However, in terms of defensive moves, and this UPA is absolutely a defensive move. Why? Because my position's terrible. I try to be much more balanced about that, or I would suggest being much more balanced. I would say, for this case, work as much on your strong side as your weak side, or your left side as opposed to your right side. In fact, when you drill it, go left, go right, go left, go right, go left, go right. Why is that? Well, in defensive maneuvers, particularly this UPA, you're not in the driver's seat at this point. You don't get to pick, okay, what is the opportunity, which is the best way to go over. That determination is usually going to be made by the person that happens to be on top, okay? So in that case, since you're essentially at somebody else's mercy, for lack of a better word, because they're in the driver's seat right there, I would strongly suggest working it to both sides so you're prepared, okay? Because if you're only set up and able to defend in one way, you're in trouble if your opponent attacks in a different way. Whereas if you're set up to only attack in a certain way, well, at least you're still in an offensive position, or at least you're still in a better position if you know what you're doing. If you're at that point where you got to do your attacks, okay? Safety first, then position, then finish. But safety, I try to figure out multiple options, or at least the main option. So go ahead and drill that to both sides, okay? Now, having said that, I'll try to go ahead on the bottom right now. As you're doing this, as the partner on person on top, remember, training jiu-jitsu is also knowing how to be a good training partner and what the levels of resistance are. The person on top right now, we really haven't talked about what makes a good mount at this point. I'm sitting here, I'm straddling Trevor. I'm not even putting a ton of weight on him. Most of my weight's on my shins. I might go ahead and hold him. He can hold me at this point. I'm not even thinking attack. I'm thinking I'm doing this in a way so it gives him the chance to practice what he needs to be doing, okay? But even that, like my level of resistance, I'm essentially balanced at this point, okay? I'm simply that weight. I'm simply not giving me any resistance other than my actual weight. And at this point, it doesn't matter whether Trevor goes over his right shoulder or his left shoulder. He can do either that he chooses right now, but it's a good opportunity to practice both. Not at the same time, obviously, but it's a good opportunity to practice both. Right? Another. There we go. Good UPA. Okay, and that's one level of resistance that we can give, or I can give, as being a good training partner right there, is I'm just simply that ballast right there. Trevor or myself, or all of you are working it by yourself. You had to get that motion down by yourself. And now you're doing it with somebody on top of you, which will be a little more difficult, even if I have every intention to let Trevor actually execute the move and take me over at this point. Okay. There will come a time, of course, that this isn't competitive yet, but I need to give him a bit of resistance so he knows how to do this in a better setting right there. We can go ahead and build up that way. Okay. And the most basic level of resistance I would give, let's just put it this way. As I sit here, as my positions, even as my weight's evenly distributed between each leg to each side, it honestly doesn't matter which side Trevor goes over towards, whether he goes over his left shoulder or his right shoulder. It honestly doesn't make a difference at this point. He can go over either one as how comfortable he is, okay? But the main way that I'm gonna go ahead and make my defense starts off with weight distribution. It comes back to that core and how I move around my body, okay? So the first level of defense on this is how I shift my body weight. Now, as a point right there, if I lean all the way over to my right and Trevor's left, he's gonna find from a defensive standpoint, if Trevor tried to go over the opposite way, if he tries to go over his right side, it's gonna be extremely difficult right now because of the way the weight's distributed, okay? All my weight's towards my right, his left, okay? So in order to get me to get over that center mass and move it over that way into the direction he wanted to go, over that right shoulder, it's gonna be very difficult. He'd have to be massively more powerful than I am at that point, but it's not likely to happen, okay? It's the same concept if you ever took a hammer or one of those like kind of workout maces, hold it on the skinny end, have the fat end right there and try to lift it up. Even though it's a lightweight, theoretically only a couple of pounds, it's a tremendous amount of work to get them in that direction right there. You're fighting physics and momentum and angular stuff and all that. It's science in that, why it would be difficult, okay? So if I can predict, if I can see that Trevor's trying to take me over in a direction, let's say towards his right, my left, then I would lean towards my right and it'd be very difficult to take me over in that direction. However, as much as I'm leaning over in the direction, as much as my weight's going over, as difficult as it's gonna be for Trevor to take me over to that side, it's gonna be really easy for him to take me back across to the side I was leaning on, the side I was defending. Okay, really easy to go over that way, okay? I can't defend both sides at the same time. That's kind of a negative way of looking at that. Or on a positive tip, okay, if you're in Trevor or the bottom situation, you know, one defense, okay, one door closes, another one opens up, okay? If you're defending to one side, something else will always open up, okay? And we can go ahead and do this in a way that theoretically should be easy to recognize, okay? And we can as a training partner, I can start off making this super obvious, okay? Start off in this mount, boom, right here. And I can go ahead, lean the direction. And if you don't believe me, try it out yourself. One way will be really easy to get through, and one way will be really hard to get through. Take me all the way over. Go ahead. There we go. I say finish, even though we've done this countless times with each other in competitions and whatever situations right there. When you drill, and you are starting to drill right now, it's always worth developing good habits, okay? Have a starting point to your technique, the actual execution of the technique, and a finishing point to the technique, okay? Try to go from a position of, I always call it strength and safety to strength and domination, or maybe back to strength and safety. But always have a start, a middle, and an end every time you drill the move. Just drilling the move in and of itself isn't actually worth a whole lot to you. We want to develop habits, okay? You want to go through, because when it comes down to when you're pressed, when you actually have to do the move, you're going to go ahead and go to completion, okay? In gymnastics terms, it's not like you can do the fanciest, flippiest, whatever, but they're going to deduct a bunch of points if you don't stick to the landing. Always stick to your landing, okay? It's always worth drilling that way. What was I? Oh yeah, so going back to here, you can go with the partner. You can make it obvious, you can make it not so obvious right there. Right here, depends on the level of your partner, they're here. Again, if Trevor's not doing anything right now, I can take him over in either direction. If Trevor gives me a big cue as which way he's going, then I'm gonna go ahead and take him over in that direction. Okay, there's always an easier way. Even when they give you resistance by default, if they resist one thing, something else becomes easier. That's one of the big natures, one of the big lessons we have on Jiu-Jitsu is once one thing is resisted, something else opens up, something else becomes easier. Okay? And it doesn't necessarily have to be that obvious where somebody's leaning over in that direction that way. In fact, it won't be that obvious. Most of the time you're going to find that those motions, that sense of, in this case, weight distribution, is not even quite timing it. It's that sense and understanding of weight distribution tends to be way more subtle, okay? One of the things that will make you successful in Jiu-Jitsu from the competitive standpoint, when I say competitive, I'm not meaning in competition. I mean like when you're actually training with somebody or working with somebody in competitive fashion, is understanding where that weight distribution goes, okay? Understanding not even necessarily how to manipulate it, like, your opponent is going to be moving their own weight, possibly reacting to you, possibly not. Learning how to recognize that and when to go ahead and take advantage of that. Or potentially even switch gears, okay? So if you're understanding this when they lean heavily one way or the other, the next phase of this of drill is making that motion a little bit more subtle, okay? You don't have to make it as obvious as like you're hanging out over here, okay? You should be able to pick up on that. And the next phase after that is going ahead, offering a bit more resistance. Maybe you're going to go ahead and start shifting your weight from the top position left and right. Maybe you're going ahead and making those defenses and just kind of bobbling side to side, okay? You might start off in a neutral position. And again, in that neutral position, it really doesn't matter which way it goes, okay? But the second you feel them going in a direction, you can go ahead and lean and make your defense on weight. And it's going to force Trevor, whoever happens to be on the bottom, to react accordingly right there. To throw out another metaphor on this, you don't want to be pot committed. Okay, that's a poker metaphor is what I'm talking about right there. In essence, maybe you think you did the move perfectly well. You had the best bridge, you had the best UPA in the world, you felt really solid on this, but your opponent saw it coming. So they made the appropriate defense, they shifted over directions. Okay, it's not worth going ahead and continuing the motion at that point once your opponent's identified what you're doing and starts defending. Okay, it'll get really hard at that point. Okay, it's more worth it to go ahead and recognize where you're at, to switch directions, to switch moves, okay, to switch in midstream, so to speak, and take them over to the easier path. Okay, moves will fail in Jiu-Jitsu for one of two reasons. Number one is you didn't do the move correctly, okay, which happens to you, not us, but it will happen to you at some point right there, that you don't do the move correctly, which is actually one of the easier things to correct. You just go ahead and repeat it over and over again. With this UPA drill, you can go ahead and do this solo. So you have the best UPA in the world. You can go ahead and work with a partner. They're sitting on top of your chest so you can get that weight and that balance, you get that feeling for going over right there. You can go ahead and work up to a really high level, even in the shelter in place, how to do UPA in that sense, to how to do the technique, okay? So that can be corrected. The other reason, the second reason why a move will fail is you might have done everything perfectly correctly there. You might have had the best UPA in the world, but your opponent identified it and they defended against it, okay? Every move has a counter, every counter 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 has a counter, blah, 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 so on and so forth. We've talked about that plenty of times, okay? So you've done that move perfectly correctly, okay? But they defended and that move doesn't work, okay? Now, there's always another opportunity that opens up there. Like if one move fails, okay, if one option fails, I should say, something else always opens up. And with the example of what we're doing with the UPA, if one defense fails, okay, or technically the UPA is a defense right there, or it's a defensive move because you're underneath. But if one opportunity fails, more often than not, something else opened up, okay? Okay, or actually, maybe let me phrase that. Something always opens up when that UPA fails, okay? More often than not, it's simply switching and going to the opposite direction, okay? Now, as a bit of a tip on this when I do this, sometimes like now, when I do my UPA, okay, maybe I was going over my right shoulder and I felt that defense right here, okay? I have the ability, without really kind of putting my hips back down on the ground, without telegraphing it, just going ahead, looking to my left side, and making that bridge over there quickly, okay? That might take some practice to get it right there. In other words, if I have to reset to 0 every single time to make my my next move, okay, and just kind of statically go back to that, that gives my opponent more of an opportunity to set up the counter to the next thing I'm gonna do. Maybe I made it more obvious at that point, okay? And from the mount in particular, just know that I'm not in the driver's seat when I'm on the bottom, technically. We'll talk about that in a second, the psychology of it, but the person on top's doing better. So if I did this right here, like so, go ahead, Nami. And we're here, and I pick the side and defends. So I come back and do, okay, I'll defend to this side. Boom, I'll go ahead and I'll defend to that side. A guy as skilled as Trevor right now, I'm never going to get him over in that sense. That's going to be really, really, really difficult. Okay. So sometimes, okay, a lot of times, I'm going to have to make my switch, essentially switch directly from one side to one side. Like I can't give him an opportunity to set up. I can't be predictable. Okay. So I go to the side, mix this defense, and I go ahead, rather explosively in that case, switch over to the other side. And when I say explosively, the move doesn't have to be as perfect at that point. You'll notice that the more he leans over in a direction, the more he defended one way, the easier it was to take him over to the opposite side. Okay? So as much as I like to stress on having perfect technique, okay, and you can drill, you can practice to get to that point, and get to this point where you don't even think about it, it's a muscle memory type deal, okay? The timing of things is much more important, okay? And this UPA, this drill, what we're doing right now is one of the more simple ways of setting that up. But it really becomes critical to anything that we'll do in jiu-jitsu is right technique at the right time. Time is everything. There's a real famous quotation by Rorion Gracie, oldest son of Elio Gracie. He's been a red belt for some time right now, that he was teaching a class at his academy, or he's giving a tour at his academy. And he pointed out that, you know, that purple belt and myself, and if you know anything about the rankings of jiu-jitsu, it's white, blue, purple, brown, black. Then at black belt, there's degrees of it, red, black, and then if you've been a black belt for 30, 40, 50 years, I can't remember. It depends on what you're looking at. You'd be a red belt. Suffice it to say, Rorion had been training a lot longer at the ranking he was at, the time he was at, than the purple belt he was pointing out. But he had this quotation where he said, like, if you see that purple belt over there, he actually knows, we actually know the exact same amount of moves, okay? He knows everything that I know, okay, in terms of technique, okay? The difference is he's able to apply it, his timing, and knowing when is the right move to do at the right time. That's the difference between the higher level and the lower level at that point. Not collecting a whole bunch of techniques or even perfecting that technique. It's the timing of it, okay? And this is a good start right now. We're only in class number 3 on this rotation right there of knowing when to do this, okay? Or what's the appropriate time, okay? But for technical terms, this is an UPA, this is an escape from mount, and this is a really excellent drill to be working with somebody, okay? Particularly if you haven't done this before. And as you get better at this, you can go ahead and build up levels of resistance to this, okay? And we can make this a drill that actually works for both the bottom person and the top person, okay? So I can set certain limits to myself to adjust to the level of the person on the bottom, and I can set certain levels to myself to go ahead and make this drill something that works out better for me. What do I mean by that? Well, check this out. If we start off with Trevor on the bottom and I'm on top again, I'm going to limit the parameters of how I'm going to defend simply based on my weight shifts, okay? Every technique I ever do should be body mechanics first, then legs, then arms, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and give Trevor everything right now to start off with, and we're going to go ahead and do this drill. And as he goes ahead and tries to UPA me one way, I'm going to go ahead and shift my weight in directions right here, okay? And I'm just going to go ahead and try to do this based on weight distribution to go ahead and keep myself on, okay? Again, that understanding of weight distribution, we said being able to understand and manipulate your opponent's weight distribution is going to be really important for you to be able to pull off any technique within jiu-jitsu. But we always have this filter. We work on ourselves first, and then we think about our opponent. So honestly, the first thing we have to think about, or the first thing you have to master, is an understanding of your own weight distribution. You can't control yourself. How the heck do you manage to control somebody else? Okay? So I do have different ways of defending this. UPA right there. I can go ahead, if I wanted to be that person, and stop myself by posting out a leg, which I'm not doing. I can stop myself by letting go and posting off with an arm, okay? And those are absolutely legitimate ways of defending a technique, or defending the UPA in this case, okay? Absolutely legitimate ways of doing this, and I will do this in a more competitive setting. But I'm also I don't want to say handicapping myself, but I'm limiting my interactions. I'm limiting things because the focus of what I'm doing right now is trying to work on my weight distribution. Okay. It's a full-fledged drill for both of us right now. I'm giving them resistance, and maybe I'm giving full resistance on how I'm shifting side to side. Okay. But it comes down to, aside from how we're working our techniques, is this understanding of weight distribution. Which way are we going to go over? Which way, how do I defend? Which way is he starting off right there? Which way does he go? Okay. And in that way, again, especially if I'm training with somebody that is, well, less experienced than myself right there, it's a way of working this technique so I can work to their level. I can make my adjustments. I can go ahead and shift slower than I did, or I can give them some openings. Or if I'm dealing with somebody that's a high level, I can still get something out of that drill right there because it's really focusing me working that weight distribution. And that understanding my own weight distribution, again, is really key to what I'm going to be able to do. Okay. Moves don't work in isolations. That's why I could go on a rant of like, you know, if you do self-defense or something like that, you need practice. There's things underneath the technique that you have to know. There's the fundamentals, but the fundamentals tend to be timing, tends to be weight distribution. It's things like that which actually make the technique work. Okay. So in essence, this UPA that we've literally spent almost an hour on at this point is one of the most basic, simple moves. It's one of the most staple moves of jiu-jitsu. But I think, and I'm hoping you see, there's a lot of underlying knowledge that you have to have. And there's ways of drilling and practicing that you're going to go ahead. It'll get you better at this. And if you understand these core principles, I've always been a big believer, then you can learn the bigger moves or the more fancy moves or everything else. But it starts off with this core underlying understanding first, okay, of how to do things, okay, and how to drill and how to work with people and these basic things. And I don't mind kind of stressing these points and talking about this over and over again, because I know that the more you develop this, the more successful you're going to be down the road, okay? I think we have anybody in the Zoom. I'll double check on the YouTube, and because this is supposed to be a live class, I like being interactive with this stuff. See if anybody has any questions about anything that I'm kind of filling out, or any kind of tips that I can give out from here. Let's give Trevor a chance to get a drink of water. Questions. I'm trying to think. Like, I can definitely overcomplicate things as I explain stuff. I try to give out useful information and something you can go ahead and play around with your partner. And then once you get down that, then you might have a better set of questions to come back at me with. Like after you, I've understood this, but my opponent went ahead and they did post their foot out. My opponent went ahead and they did post their hand out. How do I go ahead and stop that? Okay. Again, I'll tell you this, there's always that filter. Like sometimes if I have a question about something, if I don't understand the nuances of a particular technique, or if I'm in a situation where I'm trying to figure something out, then I'll be like, what do I do with my body? What do I do with my legs? What do I do with my arms? What do I do with my opponent's body? What do I do with their legs? What do I do with their arms? Okay, so sometimes I go through it that way. Now, for an example of way kind of I can process information in real time and figure things out. Let's just go ahead and say I set up to make this bridge right now. And my primary way of making this move is understanding Trevor's weight distribution. And Trevor's primary way to make his defense is understanding his own weight distribution, where it's that battle of weight distribution that goes forth, okay? But let's go ahead and say that I know my weight distribution. I did well on this. Okay, and I might have beaten Trevor on that sense right there. But as I go ahead and I make this move, Trevor posts out. Okay, and his weight's going over this way. He's posted out right now. If I think my defense is going to go ahead and switch to the opposite side, that's not going to work that well because his weight's going over there. Okay, I won the battle of weight distribution, and yet something's not working right now because core, then legs and arms, his arms got in the way. I failed to really go ahead and secure that position at that point. Okay? So what do? Do I switch direction, go to the opposite side? That's not going to work. Or do I go ahead and figure out a way to recapture that arm and take them over. One good way that I can do this is watch this. I'm going to sweep, catch it here underneath my head. I would have done that harder. Okay. And now that he can't post out here, I continue the motion and take him over. That's a rather split-second decision that I had made. Okay. I won the battle of weight distribution first. I had him going in that direction, but I failed on a small detail there. So sometimes it's worth, can I knock out that small detail in the middle of the motion right there? Okay. And again, experience will tell you when you have to, what you're successful on, what you weren't successful on, and how to make the adjustment. Okay. So faster action right here was here. I tend to prefer to do these upos starting off with my hands close to myself right here for two reasons. Number one, I'm still thinking about safety and protection. Okay. And number two, I don't like to telegraph which way I'm going. Okay. I know there's been ways that people have shown it where you go ahead and trap one arm this way. If I just simply trap this arm, for sure I've telegraphed which way I'm going. So I'm not a huge fan of this version of the UPA, okay, which has been shown a lot, okay? But I'm here. Sometimes he doesn't have to have a touch. Sometimes his hands are already at a point where he's going to go ahead and make that defense, okay? So I'm like, all right, we'll play weight distribution first. I'll see if I can't get away with going here. Now I'll go ahead, trap him. See how I just went ahead, swept, caught him at the wrist, put this hand behind my head. Whatever's comfortable, whatever works out for you, you know, sometimes it's at a higher level, there's a way of being creative and figuring things out, okay? But even when I'm being creative, okay, or I'm going ahead and throwing little things in there like that, or little details, okay, there's a base understanding that I have. There was an order of things that I went through before I even thought about how to do that, before I was even forced to do something like that, okay? So that's something you need to go ahead. If you think you've mastered your basics, if you think you got that core understanding of weight distribution, what your core does, what your legs do, what your arms do, then you'll come across little situations like that. And a lot of times as you've been trained, okay, as you start getting better at this, okay, you'll come up with correct answers, okay, or you come up with answers on you, okay? And you'll also be able to recognize whether this was a legit answer right there that worked because it worked, okay? Because how do I want to put this? It worked even though my opponent knows what they're doing to make a defense, or did this work because my opponent has no idea what's happening right there and I really could just do whatever, okay? Those of you that are tuning in that are working with somebody, if you're less experienced and you're working with somebody that's more experienced, like your roommate, your housemate, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, wife, whatever, is trying to get you to do jiu-jitsu, you're at a big advantage right there that you're dealing with somebody that actually knows what they're doing, okay? And hopefully they're not letting you get away with silly stuff, okay? That's a really important thing to you right there. We always want to assume that every technique, every concept, everything we put on, there's a couple of filters I run through on this, but one of the big ones is, will it actually work against somebody that knows what they're doing, okay? The answer is yes, although obviously the difficulty level goes up at that point, okay? Well, awesome. I'm going to leave it at this right now. I think that's plenty to play around. I think that's a lot of lessons right there. And again, simple, really, really basic technique. Okay, I wasn't just stretching this out for an hour, but I'm really trying to give you a good understanding of what we're trying to accomplish here. If you tune in tomorrow, we're going to work more on the mount position, okay? Or if you go on to the next video, if you're watching this a week later. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're hoping to be back with you live on the mat, like in person, training with you real soon. But thanks for tuning in. Thanks for your support. We'll see you soon. Take care.